started now. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you might be joining us from. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Amy Savage, and I'm a technical officer in the Climate Change and Health Unit at WHO. And I'm very pleased to welcome you to our second webinar in our Climate Change and Health Technical Webinar Series. Today, we'll be discussing a very important topic related to accessing climate finance for health, and specifically the Adaptation Fund with WHO as an accredited implementing entity. Before we start, just a little bit of housekeeping. So we do have 2 sessions for each of the webinars in our series so that we can cover various time zones. We have one this morning and then one at 3 p.m. Geneva time. They cover the same content, so if you're here now, then there's no need to join the session later. Antonis, if we could just go back a slide. You'll see here is the schedule of our upcoming webinars. So there's a QR code you can use. They're also on the WHO website. The next one scheduled is the 12th of June, looking at health national adaptation plans. I think we will be scheduling one more extra webinar in May, so just keep your eyes out for that, and we'll send an email to update you. So please do also let us know if there's any topic in this schedule that we're not covering that you would be really interested in us covering and talking about. We're happy to add extra webinars, so just let us know. Next slide, please. In this session, we will have simultaneous interpretation in French and Arabic, and this afternoon we'll have French and Spanish. So please see the instructions on this slide now and set up your interpretation if you'll be using it. We have set this event up as a meeting rather than a webinar in Zoom so that we can encourage some discussion later in the discussion session, but there are quite a lot of us here in the meeting, so I do ask you to keep yourself muted when you're not speaking, and feel free to use the chat and the Q&A functions, and we'll try and get back to you within the session or follow up as needed. Next slide. We'll also be recording the webinar for those of us who couldn't make it, and we'll share that on the WHO website. So here you can see the agenda for this morning. In a moment, we'll hear from Elena Villalobos-Prats, who is the Country Support and Capacity Building Lead in the Climate Change and Health Unit, here for some opening remarks. My colleague Antonios Kolomenakos will then present on WHO as an accredited implementing entity of the Adaptation Fund. We will then hear from the Adaptation Fund about the funding opportunities and proposal development process. And following these presentations, we will have quite a bit of time for some discussion and some Q&A so we can answer some of your questions. I'm now pleased to hand over to Elena.
Thank you, Amy. Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for connecting. From WHO, we recognize that access to funding is a key priority by countries. We conduct the global survey on climate change and health, and in this survey, countries are asked to basically let us know which are the key challenges they are facing to implement climate change and health at country level. And in this survey, access to funding is one of the most important challenges that countries are facing. From WHO, we have a very long-standing program of country support and capacity building. Probably the first project that started to be implemented was in 2008. And thanks to the work that WHO has been doing and the partnerships that we've created, we managed to raise over 150 million for countries to implement interventions. That has allowed us to create a full package of technical support, guidance, and capacity building toolkits that basically would promote for countries to be able to advance in the implementation of these projects. Something that is very important for us is to move to a real capacity development at country and regional level. So basically, it is exciting to see when we start supporting a country to see the lack of confidence that countries have, but as they start implementing their projects, they become much more aware of the level of implementation of the engagement and the technical support, the technical capacity that they basically acquire and that they are able to share with other countries. So that's why it's super important for us to work with partners such as the Adaptation Fund. And let me acknowledge that the Adaptation Fund has been the first global climate funding stream that basically recognized the importance of health, and they have been very active in inviting WHO to become accredited and in supporting WHO throughout this accreditation process. So I think we should acknowledge this support to health, because basically they are now trying to promote the development of project proposals that countries then will be able to implement. With this, I think it's all from my side. I then will hand over to my colleague Antonis for the presentation that he has prepared. Thanks so much again.
Thank you so much, Elena and Amy, and also welcome from my side to all the colleagues that joined us in this important webinar. As Elena already mentioned, for us this is a very important milestone because the Adaptation Fund is indeed one of the major climate funds that support the climate portfolio globally. And for this reason, it is really important to make sure and to understand altogether how WHO can support countries through those funding opportunities available through the Adaptation Fund for certain areas of intervention. So I would like to start by indicating to you the key focus area, the key areas of interventions for WHO in actually responding to country needs. So these are related, first of all, to addressing the wide range of health impacts of climate change. We all know that these effects and the disease outcomes which are caused by climate change aggravate, also due to the increasing trends of climate change. And of course, we have specific disease outcomes which are more apparent, like cholera outbreaks. We have been experiencing recent outbreaks in the African region, for example, but we also have the outburst of vector-borne diseases like dengue and chikungunya and Zika, which cause a high public health challenge in many countries. In addition, we have other health outcomes related to heat stresses, to air pollution, and of course, we have the direct impacts on the population as well as on the healthcare facilities. So all these challenges really indicate the need for having a well-addressed response system to make sure that the health system is safeguarded and the population, specifically the most vulnerable, can be protected by these challenges. So in this respect, it is how the key focus areas of intervention of WHO formulate, and this relate to, of course, strengthening the overall climate resilience as well as the sustainability of the health care facilities and the overall health system, but as well as identifying and promoting what are the climate change co-benefits from both mitigation and adaptation actions. As Elena already mentioned, WHO has been supporting countries at least since 2008, and we are happy to see this. On the one hand, we are happy to see this support expanding with more than $150 million being given as support to countries for certain projects. However, on the other hand, we can see that the demand is also increasing, while there is a big financing gap on the same moment in respect to the overall climate funding that the health sector receives. So the accreditation to the Adaptation Fund is, as we can all understand, is a very positive notice, some very positive news on how this gap can be addressed and on how we can further support those increasing needs as reported by different countries, specifically the most vulnerable ones. In this slide, we can see some more specific areas of action, which are related, of course, as we already said, to assessing the overall health risk and co-benefits, both from the mitigation and the adaptation perspective. And in this respect, we can understand also why it is important to collaborate with different, not only within the health sector, but also with different sectors. And again, we were very happy to expand this invite for this webinar also to the designated authorities of the Adaptation Fund, which of course come from many different sectors. And we would like to actually submit our readiness and our willingness to collaborate and make sure that health can be well addressed within the national policies, as we will, of course, listen to the different modalities on how different projects for the Adaptation Fund can be evolved. In addition, the activities that WHO supports relate to the overall climate change and health planning, and these include certain interventions like identifying climate-sensitive health risks in specific areas, as well as, of course, making sure that the adequate financing arrives to the health sector and or to the overall health systems, making sure they are well prepared to address the different challenges. And of course, another key activity is making sure to implement those necessary interventions. As Amy mentioned, in this webinar series, we are presenting certain types of interventions and activities. One of the most important ones, some of the most important ones are the implementation of vulnerability and adaptation assessments, as well as the health national adaptation plans. And these activities can actually be also supported through the different programs of the Adaptation Fund. And overall, it is important to monitor what is the climate change and health progress. As Elena already mentioned, we are actually implementing a very extended survey to countries. This is taking place every 2 years. So in this respect, it is very important to monitor and make sure we have updated reports on what are the country needs in this area. So all the related interventions, of course, are based on the WHO's operational framework, which several of you might know that has been very recently updated. This is based on the different building blocks of the health systems, with some important pillars being the overall leadership, making sure that the health and workforce are actually enforced, but as well as having informed health systems, having, let's say, updated health information systems, making sure that the adequate and relevant and state-of-the-art technologies are here, ensuring the delivery of services, and of course, financing. So in this respect, it is this accreditation to the Adaptation Fund that comes to support all this holistic approach that the operational framework ensures when we design the support to countries. And along with the other major fund, which is the Green Climate Fund, of course, we would like to highlight that WHO is so far accredited only to the Adaptation Fund, is supporting certain processes like the Readiness Project in the Green Climate Fund, but it is a really important benchmark that WHO has been actually accredited as a proper implementing entity to the Adaptation Fund. I would also like to highlight the operation of a very important initiative, which is called ATATS. It's the Alliance for Transformative Action on Climate and Health. So this initiative is something that arose from a very high level of engagement starting from the COP26 in Glasgow and setting a very important engagement with countries, which is called the COP26 Health Commitments, to which the countries, certain countries, more than 80 countries so far, at the highest level of the Ministries of Health, have committed to building climate resilient and sustainable low carbon health system. And it is also in this respect that the accreditation to the Adaptation Fund can support the implementation of these commitments that have been supported by countries. Some few technical details about this network is that it is actually the WHO has a major secretariat role, but the alliance chairs are the different co-presidents, including, of course, UK, Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates, there is a wide level of participation from different stakeholders. And these are different entities, different experts, different UN agencies, multilateral development banks and development banks, NGOs. So we are trying to have a very inclusive approach for making sure that we create a great advocacy to what is the needs of health within the overall climate portfolio. And it is also in this respect that there are certain working groups that have been formulated to support the different segments of work, and these are related to climate resilience, decarbonization, financing, as well as promoting the impacts of nutrition, health, and climate. As I already mentioned, there are certain types of activities that are supported through the implementation of the COP26 health commitment. Some of the most important and known ones are the development of the Health National Adaptation Plan, the vulnerability and adaptation assessment, as well as supporting, let's say, the overall preparedness of the health sector to make sure that there is a well-formulated technical working group, or there is a good linkage to other sectors that can support the portfolio at the country level. So all these activities can be supported actually through the different program areas of the Adaptation Fund. And it is in this respect that we encourage countries, and we are here ready to support the development of certain proposals that address those specific needs. So just a few final words on the history of WHO's accreditation to the Adaptation Fund. This was formalized and announced at the end of 2023. And I would like to bind that with the COP28 and the announcement of the first ever Health Day. So there are certain positive news coming in front. However, there is also, as I mentioned, there is a high need of engagement from different sectors, from different partners, to make sure that those increasing needs, specifically for the most vulnerable population, are well addressed. So WHO is here to support countries accessing the available adaptation funds through the different possibilities and opportunities for projects that we will hear in the next presentation by our Adaptation Fund colleagues. And of course, those projects in this stream focus on the overall adaptation planning and developing strategic frameworks related to climate and health. We have been happy to have already a first positive attempt together with our colleagues from the WHO African Regional Office. So this first pre-concept note has been already approved, and we are now already in the phase of developing the concept note, and in the next stage we will be having the opportunity to support the development of the full proposal. In addition, we can testify that we have a high level of interest from different regions, and we are very happy to be holding this webinar so that we all understand and we deep dive into the Adaptation Fund processes, making sure that we coordinate and we respect the eligibility and rules of the Adaptation Fund, and we create successful proposals. So in order to also assist this process, we are currently developing a frequently asked question document, which we will be able to share with you in the next few days, hopefully, which actually encompasses the different modalities as well as key questions that we also will be very keen to receive from your side in this webinar. So with this, I would like to first of all encourage you to share your questions, but as well as your willingness to submit proposals with us. And I would now like to hand over to my colleague, Ms. Aleja Tobarsic, who is the lead programming on innovation at the Adaptation Fund. So I don't know if Salika, you can hear us?
Yes, I can hear you, and I hope everyone can hear me well. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I hope to also encourage you to engage with the Adaptation Fund. Following these excellent introductions to the topic, I will be focusing on the finance part, which is what my institution is famous for. I have a brief presentation, actually lots of slides, but I think we will sail by some of them so that we can go into what I hope will be a rich discussion. I will give you a little bit of a background on the Adaptation Fund generally, before diving into the specific funding opportunities that exist. And finally, just walking you briefly through what the process looks like. Essentially, the main components of proposals that are common to all our funding windows, though there are some differences that I'm sure you will discover as you get underway in this process. Next slide, please. So very briefly, the Adaptation Fund is a vehicle that was established under the UNFCCC, more precisely under the Kyoto Protocol. And it is the only such fund from the UNFCCC process that has the sole mandate of supporting adaptation in all developing countries, in all eligible non-Annex 1 countries. So the mandate that is provided by UNFCCC by the process is to finance concrete adaptation projects and programs that are country-driven and based on the needs, views, and priorities of developing country parties that are particularly vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change in meeting the cost of adaptation. And what that has translated into is that most of our projects have a visible physical impact. So we don't just fund studies and research. We actually fund very little of that in very specific ways, but really we focus on investments which are usually the first of its kind have been the first of its kind in any particular context in these countries. We serve all developing countries that are party to the Kyoto Protocol or the Paris Agreement. We work around three main pillars. So the graphic on the right that you see is a summary of our current medium-term strategy, which covers the period from 2023 to 2027. Our work is oriented around three main pillars. We call them action, innovation, learning and sharing. And then we have these cross-cutting beams, such as promote locally based or locally led adaptation, enhance access to climate finance, and long-term institutional capacity to empower and benefit the most vulnerable people and communities as agents of change, to advance gender equality, to enable the scaling and replication of results, and to strengthen complementarity, coherence, and synergies with other adaptation funders and actors. Next slide, please. And very quickly, this gives you an idea of the portfolio. I've already covered some of the points during the previous slide. But just so you know, we have been established in 2001, and it says operationalized in 2007, but really our first project was approved, I believe, in 2011. And since then, we have built up a portfolio of over $1 billion that has been allocated to 160 projects, or actually dispersed to 160 projects, and sorry, not dispersed, but I mean, this is for projects that are under implementation. So all developing countries, as I mentioned, are eligible to access funding as long as they're parties to either the Kyoto Protocol or Paris Agreement, or both. And all the projects are country driven, which means we won't consider any submissions that are not endorsed by the designated authority to the fund, which, as many of you may know, are the government nominated focal point to the Adaptation Fund. We try to keep our processes simple, and I will talk a little bit about that later. And so far, so I have mentioned that all the submissions are country driven. So basically they're in line with countries, and they should be in line with countries' priorities, adaptation priorities, and so on. And so what we're seeing now is that I think it's a little bit probably hard to see in the bottom left in the pie chart, but what you can see is that quite a diversity of sectors, and so far health has not really featured or figured prominently. And again, this is not because the Adaptation Fund is not interested in health, quite the contrary, but because we're country driven, it has really been up to the countries to select which sectors, which interventions they wish to design projects around. And very quickly, you can see the distribution of the portfolio. Africa has the largest chunk of the portfolio, followed by Asia Pacific and Latin America, and a negligible Eastern European regional portfolio as well. Next slide, please. Yeah. So on this slide, what I'd like to emphasize is that we aim to implement concrete adaptation activities in the most vulnerable community. And as I mentioned, this results in visible and tangible impacts at the local level. We look for scalability as well, because we see the Adaptation Fund with the limited amount of funding, relatively limited amount of funding that is available compared to the need. That's why I say relatively. Compared to the enormous need, as having this of adding value in demonstration projects that can be scaled up. There are no prescribed sectors or approaches, as mentioned, as long as it's an adaptation project. There is no co-financing requirement, which is a little bit different from some of our sister funds. And so we do finance a full cost of adaptation. That is a very important issue for our stakeholder, and we provide grant funding exclusively. Now, of the funding that's available from the Adaptation Fund, please note that 50% of all funding is reserved for direct access. That means they can only be accessed by national implementing entities and regional implementing entities, actually. So 50% is available to multilateral implementing entities like WHO. In the past, that's meant that we've hit a ceiling, but that hasn't happened recently. And when it does happen, all it means that if a project is considered, if it's deemed good, that it may be on a wait list for a while, but that has, the donors have always stepped up, and no project has lingered on a wait list very long. At the moment, every country's entitled to up to $20 million. And many countries have used, most countries have used some of this, and many countries have used quite a bit, but I don't think that we have too many countries that have used up all of it. On the amount of funding that is available, we can discuss that in Q&A, but for now, if you're interested in any particular country and what funding is available to it, the best way would be to contact us directly. Next slide, please. So I think I will talk now about you can go ahead to the next slide. We'll talk about the different funding windows. So I've mentioned the 3 pillars of our work: action, innovation, learning, and sharing. The different funding opportunities that you see here, we've organized on this slide according to those pillars. Most of the work that we finance falls under the action pillar. So we have a big portfolio there that funds single country projects from under the $20 million cap that I just mentioned. Those projects can be up to $10 million in size. And this is accessible, this funding is accessible to any type of implementing entity, be it national, regional, or multilateral. Also, we have regional projects which are funded from outside of the $20 million country cap. Those can be up to $14 million. Our board every year approves a funding provision for regional programming. And so this is what these projects or programs are funded from. This funding is only accessible to regional implementing entities and multilateral implementing entities. And regional projects are defined as 2 or more countries in a region, or the other funding windows available under the action pillar are at the moment is locally led adaptation. It was until a couple of weeks ago called enhanced direct access, as it was only available to national implementing entities that directly access funding from the fund. Therefore, that's why it was called that way. However, now this provision of up to 5 million, sorry, it's not per country, per project. This has changed. It used to be per country, but now it's $5 million per project. No limitation at the moment on the number of projects, LLA projects per country. These funds fall outside of the country cap as well. And the purpose is to support locally led adaptation, which simply said means that the funding that is provided to the implementing entities then further devolve to the most appropriate local level. Then on innovation, we offer 3 types of grants. For WHO, I think the small grants is not relevant. That's only available to national implementing entities. But then we have the second row, small grants, that are under the Adaptation Fund Climate Innovation Accelerator. So we have a partnership of implementing entities. At the moment, they're all multilateral implementing entities that have applied and received funding for programs. Most recently, UNIDO and World Food Program have received $10 million each to administer a small grants program for innovation. So there are small grants that are given to innovators in adaptation. So that could be something that is potentially of interest to WHO whenever we send out a request for expressions of interest to join the, we call it AFSIA partnership, which should happen probably early next year. So under innovation, we also have large grants. These are large grants for innovation are up to $5 million per project. And these are available to all implementing entities and can be single country or regional country. They're outside the country cap, and project formulation grant funding can also be accessed. Just a quick mention, we have learning grants of up to $500,000, but these are available only to national implementing entities, so no need to dwell on those. Next slide, please. Just wanted to provide an update, which is very new. As of the last board meeting, which again took place about a couple of weeks ago, or concluded about a couple of weeks ago, we have the board has approved and increased support to for development of fully developed project proposals or concepts when they're pre-concepts. I will get into that later. But essentially, we provide project preparation funding or project formulation grants, as we call them, PFGs. Now those grants are available to all implementing entities, and they used to be available only to national implementing entities. So it's a big change, something of interest. And also the size of the funding that is available for project preparation has increased. So there are some rules around that. If there are specific questions, we can discuss them later. But for now, let's move on to the next slide. Yeah, so a couple of things to flag in terms of some developments to be on the lookout for concerning funding opportunities. So I've mentioned the locally led adaptation projects. This has been there's been a change since this last board meeting, so it's all very new. And as I mentioned, now this window of up to $5 million is available to all implementing entities. And we're in the process of posting the revised proposal template and so on. By the way, all the templates for the different funding windows are available from our website. So that's this should be fairly easy to navigate to from our homepage. We will be issuing a request for expressions of interest to all, I think, regional implementing entities and multilateral implementing entities to serve as global aggregator for LLA, essentially for locally led adaptation to provide grants that support locally led adaptation at a local level, obviously. So this is something that's also been freshly approved by the board, and there will be a call for expressions of interest coming out in the next weeks. There will be a regional LLA projects programs modality that has not yet been established, but that will be discussed at the next board meeting, which will be in October. So that could be something as well. And then I've already mentioned further expansion of the Adaptation Fund Climate Innovation Accelerator Partnership. And as I said, there will be a call for expressions of interest. So this would be a second one in this strategic period, probably next year, early next year. So these are all important developments that would be good to keep an eye out for, that could be of interest to WHO, for example, as well. Next slide, please. So at this point, I will go over quickly just I would say the main common elements of the process of applying for funding. We have a two-step process. Normally, the concept note, which after it's endorsed by the board, is developed into a fully developed proposal. But for regional projects, we also have a pre-concept, which is a small or relatively short proposal, basic proposal that after it's endorsed, the implementing entity can go on and prepare the concept note, followed by the fully developed proposal. I would like to mention also that all these steps are optional, except for obviously the fully developed proposal. So it's possible to skip the pre-concept stage or the concept stage and go straight to the fully developed proposal stage. Although most proposals start out as either concepts or even pre-concepts in the case of regional. And that's generally a good idea. So this is what the form looks like. It's available, as I said, from our website. I've provided the webpage on here, which contains a lot of materials that relate to preparing a proposal. So it's a one-stop shop web page. Next slide, please. What each of the templates for our different funds, which are similar but are a little bit different, come with are instructions for preparing a request. So this is what it typically looks like. It gives you section by section guidance on how to fill out the template, the application materials. Next slide, please. Yes, and what's really important is compliance with environmental and social policy. So that's, we have information on that, and both policy and how to apply it. That is an important part of the proposal at different levels, depending on the stage of the proposal, whether it's a pre-concept, concept, or fully developed, but always relevant. Next slide, please. Yeah, this, thank you. This is, these materials provide guidance on self-screening, self-assessment, provides a description of and guidance on each environmental and social policy principle. We have 15 of them, and also provides guidance on how to present relevant environmental and social risks information in the concept of fully developed proposal document specifically where some materials are required to be submitted. Next slide, please. So the country's eligibility I've already mentioned. Is part of it is it should be a developing country that's particularly vulnerable to adverse effects of climate change, but this covers all non-Annex 1 countries that are party to Kyoto Protocol and or Paris Agreement. Next slide, please. Every proposal has to be accompanied by a letter of endorsement from the government. It has to be signed by the designated authority that we have on file. If the designated authority that we have on file is different from, sometimes countries change their designated authorities, it's really something that implementing entities help sort out. Because it's important for us to have the nomination letter of nomination if the designated authority has changed. And I'm mentioning this because it is often a point where things get delayed. So I often advise implementing entities to start with the letter from the designated authority and to send that early to us, even without the proposal, so that we can check the validity of the letter and make sure you have that in place. Yes, and every submission needs to be accompanied by a valid letter of endorsement in order for us to be able to start the review process. Next slide, please. The proposal needs to make a strong case on how the project or program will support concrete adaptation actions to assist the country in adapting to climate change. So how will the activities help with adaptation and building resilience? How are the actions going to be visible and provide visible and tangible results? The project design has to be sound. There has to be a strong linkage or adaptation reasoning. So linkage to the climate risk. So it cannot be business as usual development type intervention. We need to also take into account non-climatic barriers or risks and how to manage for those, how to overcome those. And the fully developed proposal is obviously more elaborated, comprehensive plan for addressing those climate change risks. Next slide, please. Just to mention that for regional projects, there has to be a justification for why the project needs to be regional, why it couldn't be, 2 or more standalone country projects. So that's the point in red there, just an additional requirement. The project needs to provide environmental or should speak to the environmental and socioeconomic benefits that will be derived from the project, particularly that would be accrued to the vulnerable communities. And we have a strong emphasis on gender equality. So our projects are gender sensitive, and the proposal needs to show that essentially. Next slide, please. Yeah, the proposal needs to show cost effectiveness. This entails an explanation why this particular approach was selected, and comparison with other options and why they were not as attractive. I mentioned earlier sustainability as an important factor, and quantification is not required, but is appreciated wherever possible. Thank you. Next slide, please. Yeah, and then we need to demonstrate consistency with national strategies and plans at all stages. Next slide, please. Yeah. And for regional projects, this also means regional plans and strategies where they exist. All proposals need to meet relevant national technical standards. So this all responds to different sections of the proposal. For national standards, we don't impose, the Adaptation Fund does not impose any particular standard. You can see on the slide that by technical standards, this can mean different things like water quality related regulations, any sector specific regulations, so land use, zoning, building codes. And if required, there needs to be assessment for compliance before full proposal submission. So environmental impact assessment study and so on, explanation of the process. And for full proposals, regulatory clearance has to be received and technical feasibility needs to be ensured for project design. Next slide, please. Each proposal has to justify its sort of unique value added, meaning what I'm trying to say is that there has to be clear case that this is not a duplication of another intervention, needs to show if there's any overlap with other funding sources, how this is complementary and not duplicative. And so, the proposals have to list all the other relevant interventions happening in that context. Next one, please. Every proposal needs to include a knowledge management component. So it's really important that all the projects funded by the Adaptation Fund result in learning, which is then we make publicly available. So we see this as an opportunity to broaden the knowledge base on adaptation. And for that, some funding within every project is dedicated to knowledge management. Next slide, please. Projects are developed based on a robust process, which includes consultation, for example, and this consultative process needs to involve all stakeholders, including vulnerable communities and women. Evidence of these consultations need to be included in the proposal at different scales depending on the proposal, whether it's a concept note or a fully developed proposal. So usually during the development of the fully developed proposal, a consultation process needs to be quite extensive and exhaustive. But some initial consultation does happen even before the concept note is submitted. And we like to see what has been done at each stage. Next slide. There has to be an argumentation for the full cost of adaptation reasoning. This essentially means the amount being requested, why is the amount being requested? And this essentially needs to show that the funding that is being requested is adequate to implement the activities proposed. While co-financing is welcome, in the case of co-financing not materializing, the objectives of the project should still be met using the funding that is being requested from the Adaptation Fund. So that is an important part of the proposal. Next slide, please. The proposal needs to show that the outcomes will be sustainable, which essentially means that replication and scaling up, for example, with other funds, will be possible. There need to be arrangements in place for ensuring sustainability of the investments, for example, maintenance, continuation of processes, and also all key areas of sustainability, economic, social, environmental, institutional, and financial need to be ensured and justified in the proposal. Next slide, please. We look for adequacy of project and program management arrangements. So this means a clear description of roles and responsibilities of the implementing entity and executing entities, organizations, and stakeholders. And for regional projects, we look for description of arrangements for management at the regional as well as national level, including coordination arrangements within countries and among them. I think we can go on to the next slide in the interest of time. We need to see measures for financial and project or program risk management. So the proposal should identify all major risks, consider their significance, and include a plan of monitoring and mitigating them. That usually looks like a table, like you can see here. Next slide, please. Okay, this we're close to the end. This is one of the sections that deal with results, project results framework. This is an example from an actual project. So the implementing entity can develop a results framework targeted to the project with its own indicators and targets and different components. But next slide, please. But it needs to be aligned also with the Adaptation Fund's results framework. Here you see a link to, again, where these more information on this can be found. I should highlight that we're actually in the process of developing or revamping our strategic results framework, and that will probably be discussed at the upcoming board meeting in October, after which there may be some changes to the results-based management policy. Essentially, at the moment, we have a number of indicators that correspond to different strategic objectives, and we expect each project to at least align with at least one, and in some cases there's an additional one that is mandatory. For example, for innovation projects, you also have to align with Objective 8, which is specific to innovation. Next slide, please. A budget with that should be detailed with budget notes. It needs to also discuss the implementing entity management fee use, and an explanation and a breakdown of execution costs, and a breakdown by country in case of regional projects needs to be shown. Next slide, please. And this is the very last or one of the last sections in the proposal, which is essentially the proposed disbursement schedule that So for every year, the amount of funding proposed to be dispersed is listed here. And then each year, once the implementation is underway, the project progress report is submitted by the implementing entity to the fund. And once that report is cleared, then the tranche for each year would be released. So that's how it basically works. I think that's about it. Can we go to the next slide? This is information on project formulation grants, but maybe I've given you enough details for now, and we can perhaps share this information with the participants. Let me just see if there's anything else that I need to mention. Next slide, please. Next slide. Maybe that is, oh yes, just to mention this one last thing. Our process is relatively new. We've revamped what used to be our submission and review process. And now, if you can just go back one very quickly. Now we have now we invite implementing entities to submit proposals on a rolling basis for all funding windows. So you can submit a proposal at any time. Most of the time, it will take us up to 3 weeks to come back to you with a review, technical review. And then we encourage implementing entities to, within 3 weeks, to resubmit the proposal revised according to the review. This way, I think most projects can have 3 or 4 rounds of reviews from the end of one board meeting until before the upcoming board meeting. And so many projects can actually secure clearance, technical clearance, in that time frame. So once a project is technically cleared, it can be forwarded to the board for consideration to either endorse the concept or approve the project. So that is, in a nutshell, how our process works. Yeah, I think that's it from me, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you for your attention. I know it was a long presentation.
Thank you so much, Aliha, for all this very useful information and the comprehensive presentation. I think we can open the floor for questions. So please, colleagues, feel free to raise your hands. We will try in the interest of remaining time to answer as many questions as possible, but for all the remaining questions, we will make sure to get back to you with some coordinated responses. So maybe then I can give the floor. Please pardon me in advance for any misspelling of the names. So to Motlatsi Makhasane, please.
No, thank you very much, my brother. You did exceptionally well by calling my name. Props to that. I am from South Africa. What I want to find out is whether are there any applications from South Africa, and if maybe, say in South Africa we've got 9 provinces. Can an application be done provincially, or does it have to be nationally? Thank you very much.
I can maybe try to address this question first. First of all, thank you for the question. As it was presented by Saliha, there are 2 types of proposals, as you saw. It's the country proposals and the regional ones. Concerning the regional proposals, I can reassure you that there has been no regional proposal so far that has included South Africa. However, certainly there must have been proposals from other sectors, though not health, that would have actually targeted the 20 million country cap or some other program of the Adaptation Fund. Now, in regard to the provinces, certainly these the proposal can focus on provinces that are more vulnerable to the effects of climate change in a certain country, and even if this is a regional proposal, again, these can be specialized or focused in specific areas and for specific groups more vulnerable to the effects of climate change on health. Therefore, this specification can be done during the proposal formulation. But I think I will also, I don't know, Saleha, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think the question was what proposals, what projects have we supported in South Africa? I don't know this off the top of my head, but this is something that is possible to look up from our website. Specifically, if you go to adaptation-fund.org, there is a tab that is project and programs. Under it, project information gives you different views. I like to use a project table view, and then I can search by country. And then this will show you what's available there. So it's quite quick. I'm actually doing it right now just for fun, but I encourage you to try it as well. We actually have a national implementing entity, one of the, I think, early ones, Sanbi, in South Africa. They're quite active, and yeah, there is a number of projects there.
Thank you, Saleha. And can I now hand over to Vincent Tumukunde?
Yes, good morning. That's Ugandan time. My question is that actually not a question, but a request that these environmental activities or organizations at the grassroots level have always been left to maybe intervene at a later stage, yet the communities that they serve are the most prominent to climatic changes. And my wish would be that if grassroots levels are well funded, at least there could be a change in climate change and mitigation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vincent. It would be much appreciated if you can also share the organization and the country.
My country is Uganda, that is East Africa, and my organization is where I'm the executive director is Agency for Community Development and Environmental Conservation Association.
Thank you so much for your suggestion. The point is very well noted, and we also agree that we need to have inclusive approaches when designing the project proposal. So certainly this is a point that we take very well into consideration. I don't know,
Thank you.
Saleha, would you like to add something?
I also want to say that it's really important from the Adaptation Fund side, this inclusivity, and like I mentioned, even we have this big push on locally led adaptation, and the whole idea is really to devolve finance further to local levels and engage local actors in adaptation. So we do see, we have been doing that kind of, we've been taking that approach for some time now, but we're really enshrining it in our operations and dedicating, the board has decided to dedicate more funding towards supporting local level action. So that will be available to subnational actors and including grassroots organizations, civil society, women's groups, entrepreneurs. Building on the good experience with the Adaptation Fund Climate Innovation Accelerator, which provides small grants to such actors at the local level who are not accredited with the Adaptation Fund.
Thank you, Saliha. We will take actually 2 more questions from the floor. Then we will try to address some questions on the Q&A, and we will also get back to the floor for remaining hands. So I can now kindly hand over to Ute Papkala.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for these interesting presentations. My name is Ute Papkala. I work for the German Institute for Medical Mission. We are working with the local partners, especially in the faith-based health sectors. And my question would be, it goes in a similar direction as an NGO working with local NGOs. We are quite interested in the process, in the country process, how this national plans, how these national plans are made, if the designated for coordinating entity at national level, are they obliged to consult with national civil society? Is there a clear process, something like the country coordinating committee with a global fund, similar like that? Is there something existing so that we can advise our partners how they can get involved in the national process of planning and developing proposals? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ute. That's a very good question. So I will try to address this. In the case of WHO's supporting the process of proposal formulation, I would say that we are trying to take as much into consideration and take also advantage of the existence of the WHO mechanism at the 3 levels, which is the country offices, the regional offices, and the headquarters. Therefore, we are making sure to delineate with the priorities as set from WHO's country offices, but in this respect, the country offices, they also try to align with different actors, starting, of course, from the direct communication with the Ministry of Health, but expanding further to sectors and stakeholders that are relevant for actually addressing questions and topics and challenges that expand to further sectors like the environmental sector. In this respect, and also through the different proposals and different processes, we try to encourage the formulation of technical working groups, which are supervised by WHO under, of course, the leadership of ministries of health, that also attempt to create an intersectoral approach to including also, apart from different government institutions and entities, including the wider civil society, including research groups. For example, in the webinar we had a few days ago, there was on the development of vulnerability and adaptation assessment. We also encourage the need to have a multi-sectoral approach and an inclusive approach from different sectors, whether these are universities or research institutes or civil society groups or different stakeholders. Therefore, the inclusivity is something we actually encourage on our approaches and on the development of the different proposals. So I hope I responded to your question.
Thank you very much. Yes, but since
Please.
have you managed to get health into quite a number of country proposals this way?
It's just as I mentioned in the beginning, we have so far submitted one official proposal under the format of a pre-concept note. So this has been a proposal which was raised by our colleagues at WHO Regional Office, and there are several other proposals which are currently on the phase of formulation. So we have not officially submitted so far other proposals apart from that, but there are many proposals and a high level of interest both from different countries and from different regions for submitting proposals. Therefore, this aspect that you're also mentioning is something that, aligning also the previous question, we will take very well into consideration. Hope this addresses your query. Thank you. Let me now try to let us try to address some of the questions on the Q&A. So the first question is related to whether there will be a regional, whether the regional projects includes adaptation of health care facilities. The reply to this is yes. Certainly the adaptation and the resilience of healthcare facilities, ensuring the resilience of healthcare facilities is within the priorities of WHO, and for this reason, there are certain documents, there are certain policy documents that have been developed, guidance documents that have been developed. And in respect to the nature-based solutions, also this is a good point, and we can reassure that nature-based solutions also are in alignment with WHO's guidance on how developing sustainable and low carbon healthcare facilities, but as well as healthcare facilities that are adaptive and resilient to the effects of climate change. The second question is related to when it comes to locally led advocacy and action, grassroots organizations are the first respondent, but are always left behind because of their capacity. I think we started discussing with the opportunity of the two previous questions on the inclusion of different organizations and groups. I think this is a very important point, and we certainly take note of this very important comment, and make sure that when developing the proposals along with our different partners and collaborators, we make sure to have and propose inclusive approaches. In regard to the next question, what do you suggest is the best strategy for highly indebted LDCs who want to implement the SDG 13 and NDCs of Paris Agreement? As I mentioned, certainly this process, the process of the Adaptation Fund, is mostly related to the component of climate funding. So the climate funding coming from two of the major climate funds, which is the Adaptation Fund and the Green Climate Fund. In this respect, we think that WHO's accreditation, at least in regard to making sure that health is well addressed in the climate, in the overall climate agenda, is a good indicator of progress. However, as I mentioned, we are very well aware of the big gaps that exist, not only in the climate and health financing, which is huge, and an indicator we have is that health is receiving approximately 0.5 of the overall climate funding. However, we also make sure in our overall advocacy as WHO, for example, in work streams related to the Paris Agreement and such as the Global Goal on Adaptation and the Global Stocktake, we also are big advocates of the need to address this huge gap and this huge amount that is needed to make sure that, for example, in the loss and damage calculations, that vulnerable countries need to make sure that they can create climate resilient health systems and overall climate resilient structures. So in this respect, we are at least optimistic that through this extra accreditation in the Adaptation Fund, we will be able to address some of these major gaps that indeed exist in the global work streams. I don't know, Saliha, if you would like to add something.
No, I don't think I have much to add to that. Thanks for covering that.
Thank you. So the next point is how are funds allocated across different regions and projects? What criteria are used to ensure equitable distribution? I don't know, would you like to comment first?
You take that. Yeah, I don't see that question. So the question is how are funds allocated across regions and projects? There is no allocation based on regions or sectors or themes or topics, really. We do have just the country cap. So yeah, the $20 million that each country is entitled to. But other than that, there are no earmarked funds for any particular sector or region. What was the second question?
The second leg is what criteria are used to ensure equitable distribution?
Yeah, the equitable distribution. Well, all countries get $20 million, so that's what the consensus was in terms of ensuring equitable distribution.
Thank you, Saliha. Then we go to the next question, which is what metrics or indicators does the fund prioritize in submissions on the impact of the projects on local communities? Would you like to address this?
Yes. So broadly speaking, we are interested in the number of beneficiaries, disaggregated by whether they're direct or indirect, and then also some demographics like gender breakdown, or also I think we track now youth, or we will be tracking youth or non-youth status in terms of beneficiaries. We also well, our projects use a number of hectares of land protected, rehabilitated, and miles of coastline protected, number of early warning systems, for example, as well is one metric. Yeah, those are sort of the main ones, I would say. But we have 8 objectives, and so there are quite a few indicators that we use.
Thank you. And the next question is related to whether civil society organizations are eligible for the Adaptation Fund.
Well, civil society organizations can access Adaptation Fund in several ways. I've already, I think, responded whether, well, if first of all, if they undergo the accreditation process with the Adaptation Fund, and we have at least one accredited NGO. And I mentioned it's the one in Honduras, CASM. So it is possible to become accredited with the Adaptation Fund and then serve as an implementing entity. It can also, civil society often functions as executing entities for projects. They can also receive some of the small grants, for example, through the Adaptation Fund Climate Innovation Accelerator, but also through other projects that devolve funding further to civil society organizations. For example, we have a number of enhanced direct access projects. So remember, those are the ones that are being rebranded locally led adaptation, but we have a portfolio of what used to be enhanced direct access. And basically these projects are funds that provide grant funding to mostly civil society organizations in the country. So those are some of the different ways in which we support, or the fund supports, civil society.
Thank you so much. The next question is, how does the fund facilitate sharing of lessons learned and best practices among different stakeholders involved in adaptation projects within countries and regions?
Oh, that's a great question, and it has a very long answer, but I'll try to keep it short. So we have a readiness program, which first of all puts on a lot of seminars, webinars. It's mostly geared towards national implementing entities. It does different things like promotes learning between countries, among national implementing entities. Now we're beginning to include other implementing entities. There is a community of practice of implementing entities, particularly national implementing entities and direct access entities of the GCF. So it's a joint community of practice, and they have a process of engaging and sharing information and knowledge. We have a learning and sharing work stream at the fund. This entails preparing knowledge management products. So we issue reports on specific topics, about 3 or 4 each year. Those can be found on our website. There are also trainings that are designed and prepared. Many of them are actually e-trainings that can be accessed by anyone through our website. So they're self-paced courses in different topics on adaptation, mostly relating to how to access finance from the fund. But in order to access finance, there's usually a bit of information. For example, we have a training on innovation and what does innovation and adaptation mean? What is towards preparing a project, just building up an understanding of the role of innovation and adaptation, for example. So those are some of the examples of the ways in which knowledge is being shared. I should also mention that now we're exploring the role of artificial intelligence in better use of the knowledge that is generated through the Adaptation Fund projects. We have so many materials in terms of project proposals, project progress reports, midterm evaluations, terminal evaluations. These are all really valuable pieces of information that is needed to learn about adaptation. So we're looking also into how to parlay all this body of all this data information into something that can be used and is accessible more widely. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. I think you also covered the last question, which is related to examples of innovations. So through this material that is available, maybe there are also examples of what does innovation mean in regards to adaptation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
If you don't mind, I just want to clarify that innovation projects are actually slightly different from our other adaptation projects in the sense that there is the board has agreed to be more risk tolerant when it comes to the innovation portfolio. And so what it means is we expect the proposals to really push the envelope, not necessarily to know what the innovation will be, but really to put in place a process for the innovation process. So essentially, innovation projects focus on a formulation of a clear formulation of a problem that is we don't necessarily know the solution for, as opposed to our regular adaptation projects where we're like, okay, so the sea level rise is going to increase, therefore we need to build a seawall or something like that. But in innovation projects, you don't necessarily know what you will need to do, but you need to have in place a process, an iterative innovation process that will lead to a solution that, and there is an understanding that there will be a higher rate of failure that is tolerated. But we also expect some exceptional successes. We hope for a few exceptional successes. So in a nutshell, innovation proposals should reach for that ambition. Yeah. And just one last thing related to the last question on knowledge and sharing. On innovation specifically, I think we are putting on also once every 2 years on the margins of Adaptation Futures, which is a conference that takes place, a global conference that takes place every 2 years. The next one is in New Zealand next year. We put on a show, an Innovation Days sub-conference that focuses on adaptation and innovation and adaptation specifically. So I also wanted to mention that.
Thank you. That is great and great information on this conference. And the last question is on how long does it take on average to access financing? I think you already provided some clarification to that the process takes approximately 3 weeks, and then to get a feedback, a review of the submitted pre-concept note, concept notes, or concept notes or other format. And then it is also expected that within 3 weeks, the implementing entity should reply back addressing the comment. And I don't know if you would like to add anything further to that, if there is a specific time period to which the financing can arrive.
Yes, I'd just like to add, I mean, everything you said is correct. And it depends really on the proposal, on the quality of the proposal, how many reviews it needs, and how agile the implementing entity is in turning them around. Once a concept or a pre-concept has been endorsed, we expect to receive a fully developed proposal within 12 months. So that's a good thing to note. But yeah, I mean, we've had proposals that were submitted for the first time as fully developed proposals. And after a review or two, they were approved very quickly, in other words. And then there are proposals that, need a lot of work and take some time. So it all depends.
Thank you so much, Saliha. In the interest of time and acknowledging that we have already passed the foreseen time, can I kindly invite Elena for a final conclusive comment, and also along with you, Saliha, and thank you once again for this informative webinar. Over to Elena. Or Amy, I don't know if you can hear us.
I think as closing remarks, I would just like to thank Saliha and the Adaptation Fund for the great leadership that they are showing to health, and their support to WHO and to Ministries of Health, basically to be able to access funding for increased resilience of health at country level. Thanks also to my colleagues Antonis and Amy for organizing this. And with that, I would thank lastly to all participants for their time and availability. Have a great day. Thank you.